Hey, it's Roland from Practical Plastic, and here we go with part 2 of the Revell London bus build. So, I have a whole bunch of stuff laid out here. I've been doing lots of painting, putting my Works Maker X airbrush to full use and getting every single penny out of that I have invested. So, without further ado, I'm going to turn that camera around and we'll take a look at things. As always, before doing that, just want to say thank you for watching. And if you have not already, please do consider subscribing, liking, sharing, the alert button, all the good YouTube stuff. Okay, so let's get to it. Okay, so now that we're pulled in a little bit tighter here, I've been doing from the end of part 1, I had the base chassis with the engine and whatnot on there, and I had just started doing some airbrushing as I showed in there, but now I've gone ahead and done the detail work on a lot of these interior and some of the exterior body panels, and that's better, all toward the goal of, with a kit like this, and again, as I said at the close of the first part of the build, you're going to have a lot of sub-assemblies and a lot of different pieces to work with, especially trying to make the most out of what I like to think of as a painting session, in particular using the airbrush. As you saw when I'm doing the airbrushing in the first one, now I put towels and everything around, so try to make the most of the airbrushing to get that out of the way so then I can focus back on building without having to reconfigure my workspace here. So, as I said in the first one, I've been using these Atom paints for the majority of the body painting, which I'll show, and they've been working great. So definitely thumbs up on those Atom paints, really liking them. Now, to the kit. So, again, chassis, tires, no change from the end of episode 1. Likewise with this upper floor plate. But what I have been doing is a lot of the painting on the body panels. And don't worry, I am going to go back and show everything I did here with these various parts and assemblies here. But again, it's all in the goal to get the painting done and out of the way. So now I don't have to worry about spraying. I can just go in and do detailing as I've already started here. And yes, for these two, I will show how I did the detail work. So let's talk about the details. Now, I went ahead and as I worked on these panels, I took each one as its own little assembly and just worked them up to completion. So these are all set and ready to go for installation as per the instructions, which I will get to in a moment. One thing, well, more than one thing, that I want to point out right away, as far as the general painting process, you've seen me use the airbrush and the Atom paint, the plain old red, to do these body panels. I have gone back though when the painting is done and used this TS13 Tamiya Spray Clear, and not only for this particular build and particular color, but as a note in general, clear coating your kits is pretty important. It protects the paint, seals, and decals. Obviously I haven't done decals yet, but I can always go back and do a second clear coat later after the kit is basically done, which is most likely what I am going to do, and spray the decals. Another shot of clear coat isn't going to harm anything. Second note, the Atom paints, I may be wrong on this, but I have not seen these available in a specific gloss finish. All the ones that I have bought here for doing this, they go on and they finish flat. So they definitely need the gloss coat over the top to get some type of sheen. I don't like to build my kits super glossy. I don't think that looks particularly realistic in scale. The people who go out and they sit there with a compound and buff and wax and all this, hats off, knock yourselves out. But for me, for my personal taste, I prefer not to do that. Just like I don't like to do all the weathering and rust and making my stuff look all beat up and junky, because I don't like my real car looking that way. I don't want my model cars looking that way. But again, matter of personal preference. Closing point on the idea of the clear coat is to appreciate how clear coat can change the character of your paint. Now, looking at this is the same red, but the panel has been clear coated with the gloss. The body panel has not. And you can see that one coat of clear coat darkens the red color. So this is really what I want for the London bus. This is looking a little pale and washed out. If you're looking for a bus that's been sitting out in the sun for 30 years and Mr. Bus Driver never waxed it, then you could dull coat that, and there you go. To the point of, I am playing with the Tamiya paints, and now these paints, I really kind of like the fact that these go on flat, because now I feel I really have that choice of just doing a clear dull coat and leaving it that kind of look, or going for the gloss clear coat and getting a little bit of a richer color and the gloss appeal. So there you go. So as I said, following this intro, I'm going to show what I did with all these body panels. But at this point, with all the painting, I am now ready to go into putting all this stuff together, which is really exciting because now it's going to start looking like a bus instead of a slab with some tires on it. So looking forward to that. Now, one thing I will say, the instructions, there is nothing wrong with the instructions. So there's no criticism here. Just as a note, when you're building this kit, one thing I would have wished they'd done a little bit more is to denote these call outs for decals. See here, for this decal, they put a little decal symbol in there as well. But in some of the steps, let's see if I can find one now. In some of the steps, they do not have the little decal symbol next to the number. And it becomes very easy, as in this step, we just see 16, that's a decal. It becomes very easy to overlook some of these decal call outs. And I missed a few. And while I was working on the body panels, I noticed on the giant decal sheet that I had a few that the decals from earlier numbers were still there. What's nice is Revell was thoughtful enough to number the decals in ascending order through the instruction steps. So if you're using decal 19, 20, 21, 22, and you still see decal 9 and 10 on the sheet, you missed them. And then you just have to dig through the instructions to go back and find them. Now, I did deviate from some of the paint callouts. I am doing my own paint scheme. I had mentioned in comments from part 1 that in the little bit of research I've done online about the London buses and looking for what would be adequate paint combinations, I came to the conclusion that the number of these buses that were in service and the decades that they were in service, you can basically pick whatever color scheme you want. There's probably a bus that has that color scheme. So, you definitely have leeway and creative license and freedom. And, in my builds, I don't particularly worry too much about adhering to, historically accurate or source accurate color schemes. I paint the way I want to paint, mostly for contrast so that detail is apparent. For something like this, I was a little more mindful of actual paint schemes because it's a historic vehicle and I wanted to, get pretty close to the iconic historic red London double-decker bus. So I will say that. Otherwise, I've just been hopping around the instructions and doing what I want in terms of subassembly, all out of order. But I'm using my highlighter to mark off which steps I've done, decals I've done that were out of order. But point being, study the instructions if you're going to go out of order. I have said this on several of my builds, but I feel it's something really important, especially for people who are new to the hobby. You may be thinking, oh, I can skip and do that and skip and do that, and miss an appreciation of how two things are supposed together. And now because you've built this up, now they're not going to go together. So if you move about to do sub-assemblies, just be sure that you're not building past something else that you need to do and then force yourself into a position where you need to break stuff loose and reattach and whatnot. So that is that. And now, going to get back to putting this monster together. So yeah, after all the painting, very excited to get to this point. So going to get to that. But first, you'll see, as I said, how I did all this detailing. All the part fit so far is great. What I am particularly happy about is the fit of the clear parts. And here's one in this body panel. Man, they are spot on with the size of the clear part to the attachment ledge, and they just drop right in there. The clear parts are crystal clear. So that's really important for something like this with all those many windows. So that is that. Now, going to get out of the way and see how the buildup is progressing. All righty. Okay, so let's get started with things here. Removing some of these panels now that I've painted. And this will all be for building up the area where the rear steps go. So now that the red base paint is done, I'm going to start with some flat black. This will be the undercoat for what will be the aluminum for the step kits. Now for the steps themselves, some dark gray. Should have airbrushed this, but I forgot, so brush time. And now adding the aluminum to finish up the kits. You know, anytime you do metallic, always looks better on top of flat black. So there we go. Now for the step edges, this safety trim, I had alluded to this earlier, but I figured I'd get to show it here. So I went in with Tamiya flat yellow first, and then went over that with turn signal amber, so that it has a little bit of a, iridescence to it. I just wrote the part numbers on the back so that when I clip off all these steps, as so for attachment, I could easily keep track of where they go. And now attaching them, I have to say these popped right in, no problem. And this was a good omen of things to come. So happy to see. And we got some steps. Now, looking at these body panels, these are built up in individual steps in the instructions, but because it is a similar process for each one, I figured I would just do them in batch and get them out of the way collectively. And here we go, adding a detail part. This will come up again where some of these parts, they actually just snap in pretty secure. So to keep things neat, I just glued them from the back as I did with that first detail part. And here using a Sharpie to take the easy route for a piece of window trim. And these clear parts just pop right in. Very nice fit. A little clean with eyeglass cloth to get the fingerprints off. Another piece that just snaps right in. I can glue from behind. And another nice gluing area or contact area for a window. And there we go. Now there is what is supposed to be a mirror in the back of the bus. So I use some of my reflective tape here. and just pushed it in there. I figured this would look a lot better than just painting it silver, because this is actually mirrored, but just worked it in a corner, into the corners, and then cleaned up with my hobby knife. And there we go. I think that looks a lot better than just painting it, and again, getting the fingerprints off. There we go. Now for some of these attachments, small pieces on painted areas, I prefer just to use the Loctite CA glue, so this way I minimize risk of damaging my paint. And there we go. Now there was an option here with the fire extinguisher to just put an access plate with a decal, but I thought it looked nicer doing the actual detail of an extinguisher. Give a little more detail in there. Now you've probably noticed already I'm bouncing around between several different cements here. I'll discuss that at the end of the video because always important to make sure you're using a product that will work best for what you need to do. Now in this case I just put a piece of square stock styrene to hold that route number decal in place before putting on the little window that covers that up. And there's our fire extinguisher with a little decal and a cover pane, liking that. And now our body panels, our interior body panels here, are all set. Good to go. It's always nice to see how a little bit of detail painting, a couple of decals, the kind of difference they can have in bringing these things to life. So now I'm going to let all this dry and go back to doing more painting. Now this is to do the detail stripe across the upper part of the bus, this yellow stripe that runs around the bus. So first I'm going to use my Tamiya tape and really work it into the surface rivet detail to get a nice good bond. And then the bulk area I'll just cover with my much less expensive blue painter's tape. Now when it comes to painting, I'm going to start with a flat white, which you will see momentarily, and this is to give a brighter base for the final yellow, because to do yellow over red would be many coats. But here, even though it's not a perfect coat of white, it does a lot better for the yellow to cover, and it certainly is going to brighten up that yellow. So now that it's dry, tape comes off, and you can see that Tamiya tape does a wonderful job, although I did not do a perfect job, which you will see in a moment on one of these side panels, but a little bit of spray, no big deal. That's right there. I can do that with a brush touch-up, and it's all going to be clear-coated anyway. So now that painting is done, we can start assembling these interior panels. These side up very nicely, and you'll see that rectangular cutout. These panels use these big rectangular markers, there we go again, to locate, and it's a nice precise way for the pieces to fit. And there we go with another one. When you put these together with those types of locators, there's really no question as to how the pieces are supposed to align. So we end up with a nice little sub-assembly here for the cab and around the engine. And getting now to drop this in and get our bus to start looking like a bus. But I do have a gap. So I'll use my clear part cement, which is basically like a silicone cement of some kind, to fill that in. While that dries, I can add the final engine detail piece. And now adding one of the interior side pieces with those giant locator tabs. Again, pieces working together to get this as straight and true as at least I can get it in my build here. But it went on fairly well, And doing the other side now as well. This pretty well snapped in without incident, so I think I'm doing pretty well. A little liberal with the glue, but you know what? These pieces really need to be set up properly for the other pieces to build up. Now you see I'm cutting off these locator tabs because they were too tight and they were warping the piece, so off they went. Test fit showed where it should go, and as with everything else, you got to do your test fits. It's the only way to really see how things line up, and that is especially true in something like this with these multi-panel assemblies. But to my great relief, they went together like Lego pieces, this whole process here. So that was really nice. And seeing those rear steps take form, pretty cool. Very exciting. Now as I move into the pieces that wrap around the back after I do the touch-up paint for the clear part cement, you'll see these just snap right in and they are spot on, and that's great. So I just do a little Mr. Cement from the back of the piece and they are in place and good to go. Same thing moving up to this area that covers the engine, and this too, it drops in. It's a pretty good fit. I didn't really have any big gaps, so not only are the pieces locating well, but that means I am, again, pretty close to true on my build. So that's a big relief. So adding seats now to make the bus like a bus. Now I am very happy I did not attach these legs to the seats earlier as the instructions had noted, because it did take a little bit of finagling to get them settled in there properly, and having that looseness in the legs I felt just made my life a lot easier getting them sighted up properly. And there we go. Now with that done, I have to build the seats for the other side. So I just did all the seats that were left in the kit. It's the two pieces, cushion, the support frame, then decals for the seat cushion, decals for the seat upright, and then lots of mark fit to get them to settle down, and then a coat of Tamiya flat clear sprayed over it to make it a nice dull appearance as fabric would have. And now building those seats into the other side of the lower level, and our bus is ready to depart. Okay, so here we are. Now I had thought I could wrap this build up in 2 installments, but I'm actually going to stop here and go into a 3rd installment of this build. Reason being, there's still quite a bit to do, even though I've made a lot of progress, still quite a bit to do. And it just seemed that I was either going to end up with, a really long episode or, 2 shorter episodes. And I thought 2 shorter episodes, it's just easier to watch that way. So gonna call it quits here. And it's not like there aren't things to talk about anyway. Now I talked a lot, through the assembly here and pointing a number of things out, but there are a few things beyond the direct building experience that I wanted to talk about. But first, where are things right now? Well, the bottom half of the bus, interior-wise, is basically done. The next thing will be the lower level roof, then the upper floor, all of its seats. The outside of the bus will then be tacked on, and lots of windows. So still quite a few things to do. Now, I am hoping all of that goes as smoothly as things have gone so far, because my general comment, and you probably got gathered as much from while I was going through the build montage, is so far it's going together really well, and I'm always happy with that, but I am particularly happy with that on these more complicated kits, and certainly there is a lot going on here. But as it goes together well now, that is certainly an indicator that when I get to the the final button up of putting all the outside panels on, that fingers crossed, but indication right now is that that should go well. So see how that goes when the time comes. That being said, to the few points of things I wanted to point out beyond the construction that was obvious. Now, one of the first things I want to talk about is, you've noticed I have this messy black paint line along the inside body panel, what will be the outside of the inner body panel, if that made sense. Anyway, the side of the bus is going to attach to this. And if you watch some of my other build videos, you've noticed when I do cars or do kits with separate door cards, and basically this is like it's structural, but it's basically like a giant door card. I always paint a band of flat black along the top of that piece. The reason being, when the side of the vehicle's body, in this case when I attach the outer sides of the bus, if they don't perfectly sit against these sides, there's going to be a gap, and then this light gray would show. And because it's a pretty light colored gray, it's going to be very obvious. So I just paint this band of flat black, and as I've said on quite a few occasions, flat black is the black hole of detail, or lack thereof. So that should cover up anything there. Another thing I wanted to talk about that is would be extracurricular building, would be to add lights. Now, I had not intended to put lights in this when I started building it, and as I was tinkering around building up the inside here and putting in some of the seats, I thought, it would be nice to have this lit up, especially the wonderful detail inside that driver's cab. But when I looked at the kit, I realized if I really wanted to light it up, I should have built it with that approach to begin with. Because when the inner roof sits on to cover up this lower level of the bus, it gets a little tricky as to how to route things in terms of the wires and the bulbs and whatnot. And at this point of the build, I really don't want to start drilling holes and modifying pieces and stuff like that. Really, to get lights to the front of the bus, the best place to go would have been in here along the hollow of the floor and out through here, and then I could get to headlights and shoot a wire up the side and do a light for the driver's cab, and then have a separate run coming from the hollow back here and through this hollow space, through this plate, and then to a plastic tube, which I could run down the middle of the first level roof with a few lights in there. And then, and I could have one going back here to light up the step area. Now, in terms of adding lights, the way the kit goes together, there's this nice big space in here. You could put battery, switchgear, everything could go right in there. You also have this space here, which is another nice big spot where things can go in terms of battery, switch, wiring. And there's also this plate, which is a molding detail on the bottom. If you cut that out, that could be your access door into this area, or you could cut, just make a hole, outline a rectangle or a square, cut it, and access this area. So the provisions are, I should say that the kit certainly provides the space to go ahead and do that. Now, one of the other reasons I did not opt for lighting is that even though this will be covered up, just to show you what I'm talking about, this is the inner roof, that's going to sit on there roughly like so. Even though that will be covered up, and you have a lot of windows to look in there, but it's not going to be terribly bright in there. However, when the second level of the bus builds up, so this floor basically sits like so, the final roof of the bus, that center section, is separate, but just by not gluing that in, that can be opened up. And these buses, sometimes they did take that center section out of the roof for open air riding, but that also means you're going to have direct view into the top level interior, which is very much going to mirror the ground floor interior, let's call it, which means just a bunch of seats. So I don't think that is a loss, not having that lit up. And as far as this lovely assembly back here, this is all open, so it's readily visible. So not having the lighting there, not a tragedy. Even the driver's cab, a light in there would certainly allow more to be seen of the detail in there, but big windows all around, so viewing should be good regardless. So there we go. Now, one other thing I wanted to talk about, because you have seen me go through a number of different products that I'm using to assemble this kit, I just thought I would go over what I'm using and why I'm using it at that for the specific steps that I've gone through. So most of the assembly I have done with this Tester's liquid parts cement. This is kind of like my go-to general purpose cement. It is a cement. It does, melt the parts and weld them together, so you will get a nice strong bond with this. This is not good at filling or running into cracks and seams. It's a thicker type of cement, so it basically will stay where you put it. This dispenser tip here isn't exactly fine. It does come out a little thick. Obviously, you can use toothpicks and stuff if you want to, get real precise with your location. But the thing I like about this most is, although it is relatively fast setting, you do get a decent amount of working time. So when doing parts like all these panels for the rear step area, this was great because I could make sure I had things sighted and set up, and things weren't already starting to weld together while I was working pieces into place. And this stuff, if you take two parts, you hold them together for a minute. I just count up, 1,000, 2, 1,000 in my head. After a minute, things are pretty well bound together. For things where the parts are stressed that they don't want to stay together and you need to clamp or glue, a clamp or rubber band tape, whatever is your preference. I use this as well because leaving this sit overnight on something that is clamped, you take those clamps off in the morning and those pieces are together and they're not coming apart. So next item, Mr. Cement S. Now this is basically like Tamiya Extra Thin, but the day I went to replace my Tamiya Extra Thin, it wasn't available at Hobby Lobby, so I picked up this instead and gave it a shot. But it is very much the same idea. It is a very thin, very fast setting cement. I use this for occasions where I am putting parts together, and let's say everything is tight except one little area. I lay some of this in there. Because it's thin, it chases right into the seam. You push the parts together, you wait a few seconds, done. Now, in particular, you saw me use this back here on these plates because these basically snapped in. And then to make sure they were cemented, I did the Mr. Cement from the backside. Also with these panels here and their detail pieces. This way, the glue works its way into the joint. I didn't have to remove paint. I don't have to worry about marring my paint on the visible side. So this is great for that. Although this has its uses on bigger joints, I really don't prefer to use this because it does evaporate very quickly. And for something like this, by the time you're applying at this end, the paint is already the cement is already evaporated from this side. So this is a better use for that. And then this to go in and do those tabs. Next up, Loctite super glue. You know, this obviously it's a CA glue. It dries in seconds. My goal for this is when I am doing small things, painted areas where I just need a dab, things that basically are not structural, where I just need a little bit to hold two things together, where I don't feel it's practical to start scraping paint. That was the deal for some of these little detail pieces on these panels. You saw me use it there, but I also used it for attaching these rear seats just because where these attach, it's never going to be seen again. And once I had the seat in place, I wanted it to stay in place. I didn't want to, accidentally jar it loose. So instant glue, and that is done. With this, you do have to be careful because the vapors from it will fog the finish of some paints. The Atom paints and the Tamiya paints that I'm using are not susceptible to that. That's something you kind of have to experience. I have to experiment with. I have found enamel paints are susceptible to the fogging, and some of the Rust-Oleum spray paints will also fog if you use this near their painted areas. So something to keep in mind. So last but not least is my Tester's Clear Parts cement. By its name, obviously for clear parts, this really is not a cement. It's actually, I don't know exactly what it is, but it's almost like a silicone type caulk almost. It goes on a little bit cloudy. You can see it's milky in there, but it dries clear. So one, that's great for the clear parts because it won't fog them. If you make a little mistake and you get a little gloop, you'll see the border of where this dried, but otherwise it's clear. So it's not like it's going to damage the clear part. But where I find this really handy is I also use this as like a joint filler. And because it's clear, I can just put it on and I know it won't damage paint. It won't do anything to affect the surfaces other than fill a gap. And then I can go back and paint over it and gap is filled. You never know it was there. I did show using this up in the front corner here where I had a small gap in the floor and along where the side piece went in. And now that that's done, if you look in there, you can see there's no daylight, there's no gap, and I have found this to be really of great use for that. There are putties and there are a couple of other products you can use for filling seams, but they can get a little messy in their application and cleanup. This flows right into the gap. It stays put. If it's a deeper gap or area that you need to fill, you may have to go back and do 2 or 3 runs of this and build up the fill of the joint. But it's not going to damage your paint. It's not going to damage the pieces. And once it's done, you can paint right over it. Enamel, acrylic, doesn't matter. It'll take the paint and it'll be fixed up. So there we go. You also saw me using Mark Fit, which obviously is not an adhesive, but for getting decals to settle and really conform around pieces, this stuff is indispensable. And I sometimes wonder, what did I do building models without it? Because decals on anything but a completely flat surface are a nightmare without this. And you will always end up with wrinkles and creases and tears and stuff. But with this, everything settles down, it settles smooth, and your decal looks like it's really part of the surface that you wanted to, that you're applying the decal to. So this stuff is great. So that's it. All right. Going to wrap this up now. Going to come back hopefully in not too long with the finished product in the third build installment. So that will be building up the exterior panels, building up the upper level of the bus, and then getting it all done and together. So there we go. All right. In the meantime, I will see you then. I'll get busy on this. And as always, thank you for watching. And, enjoy your hobby, no matter what glue you use. All right. Goodbye.